What's up, everyone? Andrew from Nine Leaders, and today I've got a bit of a different topic that we're going to be talking about. As you know, Nine Leaders' vision is to equip new and experienced leaders with the skills required to take on 2021 and beyond. And today's discussion, like I said, is a little bit different. One of the skills we don't talk about very often from a leadership side of things, and particularly new leaders who've just come into the role, is around financial stewardship and financial leadership. So in their personal lives. So a good friend of mine, Brynn Diesel, he is an educator and a financial advisor for the Liberty Group, is joining us really to talk about through some of the tips that he recommends around how to lead finances in your personal life a little bit better. If this is the first time to the channel, welcome. It's great to have you. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button down below. And as always, hit that like button. This is Brynn Diesel. Enjoy. Brynn Diesel, welcome to Nine Leaders. It's absolutely fantastic to have you. Are you keeping well?
Mr. Grinners, I'm good, thanks. Good to be here. It's an honor to be here, seeing all of your other guests that you've had on. So
you make
it's
me
great
blush,
to be chatting
man.
to you.
You make me blush. Good Lord. Listen, man, like I said, it's great to have you. We've known each other. I was doing the maths the other day, and it's actually a little bit scary, and you're far better at maths than I ever was. But I think we've known each other for pretty much 26, 27 years. That's a frightening statistic.
Yeah, geez, it is that long, eh?
No.
I remember clearly the first day.
You do? Was I that memorable?
Well, you were the Windgat little Cape Town boy who came in and tried to open the batting, and we had to teach you how to play cricket up there in Queenstown.
Or back at you. All I remember is your huge, big in-swing bowling. This massive chest barreling towards me down on it wasn't even the Perry David. I think it was the Wilkinson Field or something like that.
No, it was right up at the top. It was
the HQ Davies.
T.W. Higgs.
T.W.
Higgs, I think
grief. It's like, listen, your memory is still pretty sharp. Eh? Well done.
Sometimes.
But for those of you who don't know, we started in high school together, Queen's College, and then you did a little bit of a bus about, to be honest.
Yeah,
you swapped
tested them. Check them all out.
The black and gold for like a baby blue color, powder blue in Port Elizabeth with Grey High School.
A little bit.
And then you swapped that for the black and red in King Williamstown at Dale College. Eh?
Yeah.
It's just like
being
around the bush.
Yeah, no, you got to test them all out so you can give good reviews, you know.
Absolutely. So I was thinking about it the other day as well. I was going just that obviously there was a large period of time where we lost contact. Like I said, you moved high schools, and then we sort of reconnected in mid to late 2000s. And just thinking now, again, the last year, we've reconnected quite a bit. Just looking at where your life has gone, your experiences, it's mirrored. We've actually had a lot of similarities in terms of both being involved in education, being involved. We both taught in Asia. You were in Taiwan for nearly 7 years, I think it was, eh?
Nearly 8 years.
Nearly 8 years. Good grief. And obviously your background, you were, like I said, you matriculated at Dale College, you went to varsity, you ended up teaching at Dale College, and you also taught later in life at Stirling High School. So you've got a very strong education background, but you find yourself in the finance world at the moment with Liberty Group. And you've sort of combined those two, but I do recall in high school you always said that you never really wanted to go into teaching or into finance. And
it's a funny story that I always tell, because it's crazy, and it's sort of what motivates what I do in a way. It is true, 100% true. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I finished school, or even in my later years. You know, you sort of start getting forced to pick your subject lines and things like that from the age of about 15. And I had no clue. I enjoyed stuff, but I had no clue what I wanted to do. But I knew for certain, 100% certainty, that there were two fields that I would never, ever get involved in. And that was teaching and anything to do with finance.
I'm going to challenge you though, because I distinctly recall you just being flipping good at everything you did at school, whether it was academics, whether it was sport or whatever.
Now you're making me blush.
Well, you know, that's how we do it. But listen, like I said, it's great to have you. Again, one of the points why I wanted to have you on an episode was really around that education. Obviously, with Nine Leaders, we're wanting to equip new and experienced leaders with the skills required to live in this new world. And you've got a very unique perspective, specifically combining education and finance. So I wanted to get your opinion. We've had other people on with regards to finance. We've had other people with regards to education, but you really bring these two together. So in the current world, where do you see education in South Africa? You obviously got experience as a teacher, both in South Africa and abroad, but where do you see and you've also got two young boys in school at the moment. So as a father, you living through this, where do you see education in South Africa at the moment? And what do you think what's your take on education? Let's put it that way.
It's a tough question because it's such a broad topic, you know. Obviously, there's your initial education. So to start with on education, obviously my background, as you mentioned, I've done quite a lot of teaching. When I was in Taiwan, I went into training. I was actually training teachers for some time there. Basically training them on how to be teachers, how to be better teachers, and workshopping and that type of thing. And it showed me a lot. It showed me that my thinking on it has developed over time, and that I do think it's necessary to have, you know, a classical background. You do need to learn stuff. You do need to memorize things. You need to go through education as we know it. So my thing is not a complete overhaul of education to ridiculous proportions. It's more just a case of trying to bring practicality of the current world into it, you know. And you see a lot now that education, I might get into trouble for saying this, but the way I like to frame it is education for the sake of it. And by that I mean people going and having to get qualifications, all these vast numbers of qualifications, and not really knowing why, or not really being into it. And the fact that in the modern world, when you're looking for jobs, you know, you finish up at varsity and whatever, best years of your life, blah blah blah, etc. And then you go into the real world, and is it actually preparing you for that? Nothing can prepare you, perfectly, but is the system doing enough to prepare people for that step into the real world? And my gripe with it currently is that it seems to me like your qualification that you end up getting, you know, or qualifications in most cases these days, when I go and get a degree certificate, that degree certificate is pretty much the key to unlock a job. And I don't think it should be seen like that. I do understand the necessity for people to get qualified and to get educated in fields, but I think that focusing more on skills would be a good idea, in that then people would be ready, for whatever it is they're going to do, and not having to spend 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 sometimes years on a qualification that you might never end up using, you know. So in a nutshell, that's where my brain is at with regards to education at the moment. And I don't have solutions necessarily, but I see that is a big problem for me.
Yeah, I think the applicability is what you said, the practicality as well. So not only the applicable skills, but also the practical skills involved. And I think anybody that's sitting in that early 20 stage, you know, they've gone through university, or they've gone through some sort of college, or even just finished high school. They're now sitting in the business world. They've got a job, and they're not necessarily equipped to understand what tax means and how to actually do your tax returns. And it's those practical skills that you're talking about. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that as well as practical skills to do a job, you know. So I'm talking about life skills. Yes, obviously we'll get onto that later from a financial planning perspective, you know, when I'm dealing with clients, but I'm just talking generally about people being shifted from the bubble of study into the real world without actual skills. They've got knowledge, but they don't have skills. Now, how do you go about transitioning that? You know, is it a practical component that gets added in? Is it just trying to shorten the amount of time people are spent on a classical education, you know, an academic education, and rather focusing on what skills are needed to fulfill certain roles in the workforce. I think that might be a good way to look at it. But I think that there are two aspects to it. There are two problems. The one is from an educational side. And I was following a very interesting thread the other day where someone posted about universities creating practical sessions and work experience for students, whether it's in South Africa or internationally, and that more effort needs to be made for that. But whether that's the ultimate goal or not, I don't know. But that's highlighting that same problem. But then people saying, oh yeah, but it's not the university's responsibility, it's the person's responsibility to go out and do that. Back to my point, I think education is focused on getting you that piece of paper, and that's what's wrong. Education is focused on getting that certificate. The second part of that is that I think from a hiring perspective, companies, potential employers, that piece of paper is a prerequisite. Now, if I'm going to do, for example, if I'm going to go and do an entry-level admin position in a company, why do I need a degree to do that?
Yeah.
And usually the funny thing about it is not that they say we want someone with a BCom degree in management or whatever. They're saying we want a degree.
Anything.
Flat. Yeah. You can have a whatever, and the degree, all the degrees being used is to whittle down the applicants. And that's the wrong approach to me, because you're going to lose a lot of people who have good talent and good skills in that.
And especially in the context of South Africa at the moment. So if you look at the unemployment rate sitting in that high, the mid-30s, 30% of the population not having a job. So the opportunity necessarily isn't there. A further aspect there is that you go and study for 3 or 4 years. You come out with a hell of a massive debt to pay for those studies, and then you can't get a job necessarily, or you have to go into a field that's not your studies at all. And then the pace at which the world is moving at the moment is, in 5 years' time, that qualification might not actually mean anything, because the world has progressed from a learning perspective. With your time in Taiwan, and obviously in an Asian mindset, did you see any parallels or any differences as to how they approach these potential issues? Obviously, you're an English teacher, and then you taught or you trained teachers. Is there a different outlook on how education is implemented?
I'm sure there is. I didn't get too involved in tertiary education while I was there. However, what I did see was statistics. And obviously I worked with a lot of local Taiwanese people. And one of the interesting stats that I came across was that, I can't remember the official percentage, but that for females, the Taiwanese population was the most qualified population in the world.
Sure.
In that highest percentage of tertiary qualifications. It was like over 80% of Taiwanese females finishing schools get a tertiary qualification. We're talking bachelor's degree or higher. Yeah. So just looking at that stat, it doesn't sort of make any, it doesn't look like a good picture from what I'm talking about, because if most of your population is getting tertiary education, you could say that's fantastic. Everyone's educated, but is it creating jobs, creating opportunities? Well, I don't know, because what sort of tertiary education are they getting?
Yeah. I think coming back to your point around skills is, as South African, we are quite entrepreneurial just in general, and to make that as a general blanket statement, but we are known as being very entrepreneurial. Our skills, if you employ a South African overseas, the people we're known as being very hard workers. But if you look at the informal sector in South Africa, SME, depending on which stats you take, whether it's government or international bodies, SME makes up between 20 and 40% of our GDP. And then you've got the informal sector, which pretty much every single person I know in some shape or form has got a side gig in some shape or form. And perhaps those skills, those entrepreneurial skills that we need to start teaching at a younger age, the communication skills, the life skills that are required to actually live your life in a way, not just focusing on the academic portion,
Yeah.
And it's always something that struck me. In school, I loved history. It's probably my favorite subject. Fortunately for me, I always had great teachers, and that was also part of the process that enabled that enjoyment. But a lot of people hated history because it was always the viewpoint was that it was you regurgitating dates and times and people, and it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But if we start taking that a step further, can we look at, well, what are the frameworks? What is the message behind those occurrences? So if you're learning about World War II, all right, well, what are the things, the structures that led up to World War II? What are the reasons for it, and what can you possibly do in a new world to prevent something like that happening again? So it's the lessons behind the history, which could possibly be something that could be implemented. And it's interesting that I had a conversation a little while ago with John Foster Pedley, the dean for Henley Business School in Africa. And he's saying exactly the same thing. He said, in the old world, pre-COVID, we had these frameworks that a lot of people aspired to, and they used within their businesses. But that's not the stopping point. You learn a framework and you implement it, and then in a new environment, how do you adapt that framework to the new challenges, et cetera, et cetera? And it's that thinking that we sort of need is I learn a topic, or I learn a subject, and then how do I apply it potentially in a new environment or from a new perspective? Obviously in your space now, from a financial side, and you've got your two boys, like we said, at school, is that a part of, do you feel that should be brought into school earlier?
Yeah, I think touching on what you were talking about now, I think that's definitely a part of it as far as education goes, bringing the practicality into basic education. And I think there are moves in South Africa to do that. If you look at the headlines recently about restructuring of curricula and stuff like that, so I think the idea is there. I think the idea has been there for a long time. The problem with South Africa is always implementation. Can you execute? And I think that's always going to be the issue. And I just hope that some of those ideas can be implemented properly, And like I said, just touching on it again, and I want to make clear the need for those subjects, for those, the traditional subjects, and the subjects that teach you how to learn, the subjects that teach you how to learn content, your content subjects, as we used to call them. Those are still important. You still need to learn. That's a life skill. Learning how to learn is a life skill. But there needs to be more practical side. And when they brought maths literacy into high school curriculum, probably about a decade and a half ago now, the initial response was, "This is ridiculous. Why would you want this? This is terrible. It's watered down maths." And maybe the curriculum at the time, was a little bit watered down, and maybe it didn't quite hit the spot. But the idea behind it was great, in that if you weren't going to become, an engineer or a statistician or whatever you're going to need, maths at a higher level for, then why not teach kids about how to work out compound interest, how to do tax calculations, what it means, how to open a bank account, that type of stuff. And that can all be worked into maths, definitely. And I think it should be worked in to maths, life skills, etc. I've been out of the system a long time in South Africa, so I can't really comment on what's happening now. Maybe, people can help us out there. But I think I'm hoping that it's being refined over time to incorporate that type of thing.
Yeah.
Just on my boys, you may have seen it, and I think I mentioned it in some of the blogs that I sent to you. I've been running a segment, as I call it, a series of posts over the last few months. Small change, yeah. So, cool. And the idea behind it, thank you. The idea behind it was obviously to give people. It's not it's not complex ideas. It's not something I haven't come up with it. It's stuff that is there, but just to give people a push to do it. And I did it more for myself than anything else, because I realized that, that's what I want my kids to have. I want them to have a practical understanding of money, so that they, and this is going to sound very cliched, but so that they don't make the mistakes that I made. By that I mean, they have the potential, and they are empowered to make better decisions. I don't want to push them. I don't want to tell them that you have to do this and you have to do this, but I want them to understand the big picture, so that when the time comes, they can make those decisions themselves.
Yeah.
And that's whether you're dealing with children or adults. It's sort of the same in financial planning. And my time in financial planning is very much centered around that. And that's why I've brought in that aspect of education, is because, again, it's not a new concept. There are a lot of people that go out and say they'd rather educate people than tell them what to do. It's not new. It shouldn't be. All planners should be doing it. But making it the focus from a young age, I think would help the way people, especially in South Africa, the way people go about dealing with their finances. And hopefully it can help.
And I suppose from a skill perspective like that, one of the things, I mean, in the corporate space, we do a lot of training around things like creative thinking, creative problem solving. And those concepts aren't rocket science, in all honesty, but corporates and executive education spends millions on training further businesses and corporates, and it's like I said, the frameworks are pretty simple. It's just about the implementation of it. There's those things that can be taught from a young age. How to make a qualified decision, how to look at the information that you have on hand, and how to make good life decisions, business decisions, whatever it might be, based on frameworks that are there. And then obviously, as you come across new challenges, look at adapting those frameworks. How do you see that flowing into adulthood now, with the clients that you've got on board? How does that sort of, where do you see the biggest struggles or the biggest challenges that people are having currently?
But before I get on to answering that specific question, I think how it flows, it starts back with what we were discussing earlier, that whole skill side of things. I think the days of a 40-year career are gone. And you mentioned the side hustle. We definitely, and in South Africa, I think I've seen it, a lot of people talking about it in recent times, saying that SMEs and the entrepreneur is going to be the savior of the South African economy. We can't rely on big corporations to do it. We need people to create jobs for themselves, as well as companies to create jobs for people. If you don't have it both happening, this problem is just going to perpetuate, so we're gonna stay in that situation. So teaching people skills, including financial skills, is going to be vital. And you don't need 3 or 4 years to teach someone a skill. And that's where stuff like the short courses and that type of thing comes in. Like, why not weight those things or rate them higher? If I've got a 6-month short course in a specific skill, and that's what the skill that you need, then why is my degree seen as being a better qualification than a 6-month short course in that specific skill? And the same thing with finances. I mean, when I deal with clients, I deal with it's difficult because in the market these days, because the world has changed so much, in whatever field you're in, whether you're in sales, whether you are, well, pretty much like your article said the other day, everything is sales. Everything can be brought back to sales. These days we are selling ourselves and selling our skills, and that's how we make a living. And it doesn't matter who you are, that's essentially what you do. You sell your skills. Whether you earn a salary from it or you work with deals and whatever, you are essentially selling something that somebody else can use. And I think dealing with such a vast array of clients allows you to implement a lot of those ideas differently. There are always going to be people who trust you and as a financial advisor and say to you, I want this done. Well, after you've had your initial planning sessions and discussions, there are going to be times along the way where they just say, listen, I just have this, let's get it done. And you do it. But the important thing is that you have that relationship and that you build that relationship. The problem I see at the moment in South Africa is that South Africa seems to be behind the likes of, well, the developed world, the likes of the UK, Australia, Europe, and the States, in that, the whole talk of the fourth industrial revolution, et cetera, tech coming in. The tech is progressing so quickly that it's leaving people behind.
Mm.
And because so much is done online now, people are so nervous, so skeptical of doing anything, and it stops them from making decisions. So the biggest problem with South Africans that I've seen is, number one, they procrastinate too much.
Yeah.
And I haven't made my mind up yet. I haven't decided yet. Give me more time. And number two, there's got to be something better. You know, it's always a case of this must be a scam. There's got to be something better out there. When it should be about developing a relationship with someone you can trust, and looking at that picture and then thinking about how to move that forward, you know, and how to get that going in the long term over the 20 to 30 years. But you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's the big problem.
And obviously, in terms of that starting somewhere, obviously the earlier you do it, the better. But it's
Yeah.
not always necessarily the priority for a young leader coming in, or a young person coming into the workplace. They might be sitting with debt, they might not be sitting with debt. But now suddenly they're getting a stable salary. And it's sort of like, okay, well, I've never had this before. Let's just flip and go out and splurge it. In terms of that,
Yeah.
obviously, you're based down in the Eastern
And
Cape.
habits form very quickly.
100%, absolutely. And they don't necessarily think long term as to, all right, what is that retirement age? What is that
Yeah.
how am I preparing for that future? On that point though, we live in such a fluid world that can we actually, as a financial advisor, can you give solid advice and say, well, there's so much uncertainty, so whatever you do, is it going to actually come to fruition? Right, tough
You see
question.
no. Actually, that's the easier question, because
Okay.
that is where the misconception lies.
Mm.
And I still have people all the time saying to me, all right, I'm starting this 500 Rand per month retirement annuity now. What will that give me when I turn 65?
Yeah.
And I say to them, think about how this works and think about whether that is actually a logical question or not. But people don't think about that. And
Yeah.
when you say to them, this is how it works, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
But you've got to start somewhere, you know. You've got to make that start, and then you can at least build on it. Every little piece of the puzzle that you put in takes away a little bit of uncertainty. Am I saying to you that if you come and work with me and we develop a financial plan, that's it, tick box, done, right, ship you off, put you in the cabinet, and you're done, your life's sorted? No,
Yeah.
it never works like that. Because, as we said as well, the times of the 40-year career and having a pension payout and everyone being happy and not having any worries about money, that's done. You know, the world, your world can come crashing down for whatever reason, for many different reasons at any time. And that's not being, you know, a prophet of doom or anything. It's just saying that's the reality.
Yeah.
And the point of working with someone constantly is just trying to help to get those little pieces of the puzzle that do try to give you as much certainty as you can get in an uncertain world.
Yeah. I think it's something as a leader that I ran into very often was that sense of it's something it's for another day. It's sort of, I've got these issues right now. I need this debt to be paid back, but I because it's not tangible, 30, 40 years down the line, it's not something that I need to focus on right now. So I'll put it off for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But it's those initial, the earlier you start, obviously, the better the return at the end, regardless of what that uncertainty is. There's more of that sense of certainty, like you said. If you had to put yourself in, let's crystal ball it, 20 years time, where do you see financial planning and part of that education side of things? What's your bigger vision in combining education and finance? Where do you see it going?
Okay, now that's a tougher question, because obviously with the rate of change that we're experiencing, you know, it happens so quickly. I think the main thing is that we've got to expect uncertainty. We've got to expect things to be changing, and we've got to, again, it's a blog you'll see on my website. I think it's coming soon. I don't know if we've posted it yet, but being resilient. You Having a plan used to mean that you had a plan, great, tick, like I said, tick it off and you've got it. And that was awesome. Then you move on to the next goal. Now it's about rolling with the punches. It's about doing your best to solidify whatever your ideas are and get that and create that, well, for lack of a better word, and it might sound very grand, but an empire, you want to create that little empire, no matter, how big or small your goals are. You want to create something that means something to you and your family in the long run. Does it mean it will never change? No, of course not. It's going to be changing all the time. And I think that's where the value of working with someone comes in. And I think that's the only certainty you can give. I can say to people, your plan is probably going to change for many different reasons. It's probably going to change many times over the course of time. But what I'm saying to you is that I will be there with you and we will figure it out. Or we'll do our best to figure it out. So one side of it is accountability, just making the start and making sure you're doing what you do and playing devil's advocates and saying, really, are you sure you want to cancel that one now? Because these are the repercussions on it, and just making people think a bit more about the bigger picture, rather than getting panicking in the moment. But secondly, about getting people to take the time to prioritize it. I know one of the biggest problems is that people are busy. There are very few people who I work with who aren't busy. We all busy. But the problem is, like you say, people put it off. Oh, it's something I can do next year. Oh, it's something I can do tomorrow. It's normally not next year. It's normally tomorrow. But you do get no, phone me in January. That'll be a better time. There's no better time. Already I've spoken to so many people where you do contact them, and you sort of feel like you're pestering them sometimes. But you go, hey, listen, Andrew, we said that we're going to chat soon. I told you to call me in January. Yeah, but it's March now, and it's been 11 months or whatever the case is. Oh, geez, has it been that long? Oh, yeah, we've got to get this done. It's that kind of thing. And while I don't like being a nag, I don't like pestering people. It is part of my job, that's part of what I offer is I'm that little guy on your shoulder saying, hey, are you doing what you wanted to do? Are you making sure that you do it? Well, it's about committing for yourself. I'm not holding at you because it's a plan that I told you need to put in place. It's about committing to succeed with your own goals. And on that, I mean, I don't have it all together either. Nobody does. I'm not saying, oh, this is, I'm perfect, and I'm trying to do all these things at the same time as my clients are.
Yeah. I think that's also a part of that. I'm going to put this into two spaces. One is, so my brother is my financial advisor. I kind of, to your point, that relationship and that trust, because he's my brother, he's got my full trust. So when he comes to me with something he thinks it's a good plan to put in play, I sort of trust and go along with it. I don't necessarily always question in that space as much as I question in other spaces, because that trust level is there. But to your point earlier with regards to sales, I think as a perception that people often view financial advisors as sort of that sort of manipulative. They could be that used car salesman approach of, I just need to flog your product to keep you on the line type thing. But when it comes to what you said earlier around that relationship, that trusted advisor for the long term, not just for the short-term goals, but really that long-term process, that's where it really starts to bear fruit and actually make a impact in your overall life, creating that certainty, etc.
A product at the end of the day is just a means to an end. There's no, and I always say this to people as well, there's no right and wrong in financial planning. There's right for you and wrong for you, potentially. But that's also opinion based, At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what product you are in or what product you like. I have some clients who go, I want this. And I will say to them, okay, these are your options. Are you sure you still want this? sometimes I would recommend, I would say, fair enough, I'd recommend what you're asking for. So that's cool. We're on the same page. Other times I'd say, oh, I don't really recommend that. And when you get into the murky waters of products, you can go on for days and days, and you'll have people telling their varied stories about their interactions with insurance companies, for example. What people need to understand, and what people need to get out of how financial planning is going forward, is at the end of the day, you don't want something that's bad for you, but the focus must be on the conversations that we have. The focus must be on what you want, what your goals are. And then you just bring in a financial product at the end of the day, potentially, if that's what the solution is. You bring in a product to get to that goal. All right. Whether that product is right for you or wrong for you is not the question. It's a case of, is the product doing what it needs to do to get you to that goal? Is it aimed at doing that? Yep. So if you're planning just for product sales, then you're not a financial advisor or planner, then you're a salesman. And I don't see myself as a salesman. I sell myself. I sell my services.
Yeah.
The products are just what we use to get to the outcome sometimes.
And I suppose also the other aspect is nothing is set in stone. So you can have a product, if it's not working necessarily, it's not delivering on what it was, and your environment changes, and your needs change, there's always the ability to then change it to a different product, etc., etc.
Exactly. That's why it's about those conversations. It's about saying, right or wrong. I always say to my clients, I'm here. If you have something going around in your head, send me a WhatsApp voice note. Let's chat about it rather than you worry about it. It's not about an annual meeting. Yes, that's important because you do need to review all the time, but it's not about that. It's about thinking about it. It's about fitting everything together, and it's about having those conversations.
Yeah. I'm going to bring you back to your kids, if you don't mind. If again, I'm not in the context, so I don't have kids of my own. But if we've got parents listening, what is your 2-3 biggest tips that you can give to parents to be able to equip their kids themselves around financial acumen?
Okay, first one is, and this sort of came out when I was in Taiwan, because Taiwan money culture is very different. The Taiwanese society is very much a cash society, or when I was there, at least it was, in that a lot is still done with cash. It's here in South Africa. I mean, I never have cash. I swipe my card for everything. I hardly ever have cash. In Taiwan, people deal with cash. That's the main one. Yes, people do have credit cards, etc., but that's mostly for like online business and stuff like that. If you go into the store, you pay with cash. That's standard. It may have changed by now, but what that also brought out was that there was no real taboo about speaking about it. Like people would come, and this was one of the things that in training, when we did our initial training, people, they mentioned to us as like when we're dealing with a culture shock and that type of thing, is that people are very different. Now, if you had to walk up to a random stranger, someone you're sitting next to them at Home Affairs waiting for something or whatever, and you'd say, oh, so you're an accountant. Okay, so how much do you earn? And that kind of here you would go, excuse me, what? I'm sorry, but that's none of your business. In Taiwan, that wasn't really an issue. Oh, you're an English teacher. Wow, you must earn a lot of money. How much do you earn? What's your salary? What I am saying is that to have conversations about money with your kids from a young age, and you can aim it. You can target certain areas, but talking about money from a young age, I think will leave them in a place where it's not something that they only deal with when they get to adulthood.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is practice it. Get them doing stuff. Implement things. I give my boys. They're still. I'm still trying to get to do the videos of the last few videos for Small Change, but give them money to work with. You don't learn unless you do something. you know. So if they make the mistake and they blow it all, that's a good life lesson at the end of the day. So let them do it, you know, open a bank account for them. Let them go and withdraw money at an ATM, you know, for stuff themselves. Like I say, you can structure it that they're not really doing that. You're giving them the money, but to them, they're at least handling it. You know, money is not something that again, so implement, practice it. And number three, and this, at the risk of being hypocritical, because like I said, I don't have it all together. I'm trying hard, and I learn every day in this industry as well. But I'm trying to implement plans myself. But I think it's vitally important to practice what you preach. You know, to show your kids how to do it. And when you have things happening, to explain to them what's happening. You know, if you're buying a car, explain to them. You know, when we changed vehicles recently, and my eldest asked about where the money comes from. How does it work? You know, and if you don't have all of that money, it's an expensive thing, a car. If you don't have all of that cash, how does that work? And it sort of led to a discussion about vehicle finance and how loans and stuff work. And you'd be surprised how much they know already, or how much is going around in their head. And this is just sort of bringing it all into focus. You know? So practicing what you preach. Yeah. So for me, number one is, don't be scared to talk about it. Be careful of how you approach it, obviously, but talk about money. Number two is, let them deal with it practically. Let them physically deal with transactions, etc. And number three is, explain stuff to them as it goes, and try and model behavior for them, you know. And I think that's a good start.
Something that's interesting, just as you're talking, obviously in the current curriculum, there isn't this type of subject, or it's not part of exams or anything like that, or even classroom learning. Something that I've been involved with the project very briefly on with Queen's College is around leadership. So what they've done is, this year they've actually launched a full-on 5-year leadership development program that at each level of grade, whether it's grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, up to matric, they have certain leadership aspects and leadership training that every single boy goes through. And it builds on each other till the time where they get into grade 11, and now they're having to step up into leadership in terms of a prefect body or school monitor or anything like that. Is there space and room, do you think? And it's not part of the curriculum, like I said, it's an additional that the school is doing for the student body. And they've obviously implemented certain structures within the body. Not just, they don't just have the prefect group like we used to have. They have other levels as well. Is that something that potentially, from a school perspective, that could be done? That it's an additional topic. It's a finance. We used to have at school. We used to have those the social clubs, the chess club, and the SCA, and all of those other, as the bridge club, and whatever, the hiking, the photography. Is that something perhaps that might be an idea of going, well, the finance club, something like? Does that make sense?
I think there's so many things that can be done. You know, I'm fairly fresh in the industry, relatively speaking, you know, but I mean, the thoughts are all there of courses, you know, the big thing these days is about courses, teaching people, again, as an extra thing in schools. I don't think it has to be a subject, like you're saying. I don't think it has to necessarily be incorporated into maths. Although that would be the logical place to put it. It could definitely be a once a week, half an hour or 20-minute discussion, you know, an age appropriate discussion. And I think not necessarily having it as a learning thing, but having it as bringing someone in who's passionate about it to speak to the kids about it and to teach them basic skills. There's definitely a space for that. And whether you can get your teachers, you know, trained up to do something like that would be even better, if they were passionate. Because at the end of the day, you know, when we go back to our learning days, to a large extent, your interests were shaped, as you said, by your teachers. You know,
Yeah.
if you have a great history teacher, that becomes your favorite subject, etc., etc. So, to have someone doing it for the sake of it is not going to work. You need to have people with the skills who are passionate about it, implementing stuff like that. All about that implementation and execution again. You know, so I definitely think there is space for something like that in the schools.
Okay. From a new leader perspective, obviously we've spoken briefly a little around this, but if I, as a new leader, I'm coming into a position, like I said, I'm mid-20s. I've just now got a promotion into leadership, and I've had a bump in my salary potentially. What sort of tips? What do they need to look out for in terms of a financial advisor? What would your three things recommend to a young leader, and go, right, this is what you need. You're looking for a financial advisor. You need some budgeting skills, some investment advice, etc. What would you look for in terms of that financial advisor?
Okay, the way, in my experience, the way things used to work was you always had someone in the family that it was always just passed down. Everyone had a financial advisor, and you just went to the same oak that your dad went to, and so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. And it worked. It works. It does work if you're just ticking boxes and getting what your needs are. But I'm jumping around here, but I've worked with a number of youngsters who are in this situation. When I say youngsters, early to mid-20s.
The youngsters compared to us. Let's be honest, we're getting old. It's all right. We're getting gray. It's fine.
Yeah, we're adding more chins to our repertoire of chins. So that's, I get excited, and I sort of like, I have to hold myself back. And I tell people when I speak to them, I say, "Oh, I'm so excited to chat to you because, even though when I was 26, 27, my dad said to me, you need to take out a retirement annuity. He pushed me to do that and whatever." I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. My dad's cool. He knows what he's talking about. I'll do this. It wasn't, till years later that I actually understood what it was that I was doing. So if you can get that grounding from a young age and at least understand how it works, the good of having a financial advisor is they can give you that basic understanding. So that's where the education comes in. The first thing I do when I meet someone like that is I say, hey, just bear with me here. You might know the stuff, you might not. But if you don't know it, and in my experience, most people don't, it will help you to understand the big picture. And you start right at the bottom, and I teach people how financial planning works, what the areas are that you need to look out for. It's not just about getting rich, and that's what people think. Oh yeah, so what investments can you give me that are going to give me the highest growth?
Instant gratification.
How much? Yeah, how much will I have when I turn 60? I want to know that stuff now. And if you can't tell me, then you're not a good financial advisor. It's not about that. It's about understanding how it works, so that every time there is a time in your life, like you've mentioned, where you get a promotion or you change jobs and you get that boost, you are attuned to going, not, yes, now I can get that new car. If that new car was part of your plan, then fantastic. But what people do, and what we all do, and it's human nature, is that as soon as you get that bump in salary, it's like, yes, now I can get all those things that I wanted to get that I couldn't get before.
Yeah.
And then suddenly things go the other way. So suddenly, like COVID, a lot of people took salary cuts.
Yeah.
They didn't go the reverse of that. How many of those I can cut out so I can save money? And that's a massive pitfall. And if you can have that grounding from the start and be chatting to someone, that's the value in it. Speaking to someone constantly and saying, what is this? Why do I need this? I don't understand this. Help me out here. That is the value in it, so that you are in the position that essentially, if I do my job properly, if I'm working with a client from the age of, say, 25 through to the age of 35, within 10 years, they really probably shouldn't need me anymore.
Yeah.
But they will need me because I would be a trusted person who they can bounce ideas off of. Yeah. And that's where the relationship goes.
I think there's also a perception with, and I was the same, is that, I had my brother, but we only really started talking finances late in my 20s. And people have the perception that you need to be at a certain level, or you need to have a certain amount of wealth now to be able to get a financial advisor in to be able to structure things. Where the complete opposite is true. The earlier you start with it, the better you get that grounding in place, the better it's going to be for you long term.
Yeah, it's building blocks. It's about commitment and psychological commitment as well. If you know, right or wrong, about 30, 40 years ago, if you only started planning when you were 30, you could still come out okay, because we went through times, in the stock market, especially where, high returns were common.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times, I remember my dad telling me stories of times where people were saying, oh, we'll guarantee you 25% returns. We'll guarantee you 24% returns. Now, over the course of time, you're lucky if you get, 7-8% in the long term, under current conditions. So things change, and people need to be aware of that and change as well. And you can't go on what happened with your parents. You can't say, oh, but my dad only started when he was 35 and he's fine.
The world has changed.
I get the reverse of that quite often as well, where people are inspired and they are pushed and they are, they want to learn about it and they want to start because of what's happened with their parents, and they see their parents aren't prepared and haven't planned properly. That does happen often as well, which is a good thing. I mean, it's not a good thing because their parents are in a situation, but it's a good thing that it's pushed them to get started. Yeah.
Last question. Why don't I just put all my cash flow into Bitcoin?
You know what? There are going to be trends, and there are going to be things that come up. At the end of the day, like I said to you before, I don't think in this industry there's any right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's about knowing what you're doing. It's about understanding what you're doing. So I'm not going to comment specifically on Bitcoin and
come on.
I will say this.
Straight on a block.
I will say this. If you understand what you're doing and you're doing it for a specific reason, and you understand what the potential outcomes could be, go for it. If you don't, and I mean, you hear the horror stories, there've been a lot recently.
Yeah.
You hear the horror stories about investing in various things. If you don't know what you're getting yourself into, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as long as that is in place, whatever it might be, whether it's retirement annuity, whether it's insurance, whether it's crypto, if you know what you're getting yourself into, then nobody can be unhappy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know the risks, you know that there's two sides to every coin. If you don't, then think about it. Think about it a bit more carefully. You wouldn't buy a business without knowing whether it was profitable or not.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say.
Well, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic having you, catching up again.
Thanks, man. It's been a nice chat.
Obviously, with if people want to reach out to you, I'll have all your contact details in the description of the video below, and obviously link to your blogs. I've enjoyed reading them, seeing your videos as well. They really do add a lot of value and content. So it's been great catching up.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And all the best for the rest of 2021.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. And I'll obviously be following NineLeaders keenly as well, and hopefully we can get together again soon.
Sometime soon.
So
absolutely.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah.
Cool beans. Listen, you must take care of yourself, and regards to the family.
You too, Grinners.
All right,
Chat again soon.
Take care.